Today's episode is being brought to you by Eagle Financial Group. From fractional CIO to tax prep and everything in between, Eagle Financial Group can help. Find them on the web at eaglefsg.com.
Before we get into today's interview, I've got a very important message for those of you about to enter the residency match in the spring of 2024. MD Coaches is excited to be highlighting your unique value. This is a special 4-week group coaching experience specifically designed to help you identify and present your best self during match interviews. All participants receive 1 individual coaching session and 4 group coaching sessions. The first cohort begins Sunday, September 17 at 7 p.m. Eastern. A second cohort begins on Sunday, October 10 at 7 p.m. Eastern. Cost is $475. There is a special discount for American Society of Physician members. So get more details and register on the web at mdcoaches.store.
Paging Dr. Cook. Paging Dr. Cook. Dr. Cook, you're wanted in the OR. Dr. Cook, you're wanted in the OR.
Welcome to the Prescription for Success podcast with your host, Dr. Randy Cook.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Prescription for Success. I'm Dr. Randy Cook, your host for the podcast, which is a production of MD Coaches, providing leadership and executive coaching for physicians by physicians to overcome burnout, transition your career, develop as a leader, or whatever your goal might be. Visit MD Coaches on the web at mymdcoaches.com because you're not in this alone. And don't forget that CME credit is available when you listen with us. Just look for CMFI in the show notes to learn how. If you follow our podcast on a regular basis, you know that we occasionally interview non-physicians with special knowledge that might be of interest for physicians. Today's guest is just such a person. He is the founder of Eagle Financial Group, where he provides a range of financial services for physicians and other professionals as well. So let's hear my conversation with Tariq Collins. I'm really looking forward to my conversation today. As our regular listeners know, we spend a lot of time talking to physicians on prescriptions for success. And once in a while, we like to bring somebody in who's got some really special information that's useful for physicians. And that's what we're doing today. So I want to say hello to our guest, Tariq Collins. So nice to have you on the show today, and thank you for being with us.
Hey, thank you, Randy. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, I'm looking forward to the conversation, and as we always do, we're going to begin at the beginning, and let's talk about your early life. I'm kind of fascinated with the fact that you did a lot of your growing up in the Bronx. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, for sure. So I didn't do a whole lot of growing up in the Bronx, but I'm originally from New York. Family grew up around Jackson Avenue. At an early age, elementary age, we ended up moving to Atlanta, settling around the city of Atlanta. And so sometimes I would go, summers between New York, Atlanta, and then, most of my family is from, southern Georgia on my mom's side. So we spent a lot of time down there. Yeah. So they're from a town called Montezuma, Georgia. So we spent some time down there. But ended up growing up in Georgia, Atlanta, Georgia, where I graduated high school at Stockbridge High School. So some of my early years, I think I went to a few different elementary schools around the city of Atlanta. And then, like I said, we ended up graduating in Stockbridge High School in the Stockbridge, Georgia area.
And tell me a little bit about your parents or in other relatives, are there medical types in the family, or are you or financial types? Or tell me about your family.
Yeah, for sure. So interesting enough. So my family. So I grew up. My mom was first married to my dad, but then they ended up getting divorced.
Mm-hmm.
My dad spent some time in prison, and then they got divorced, and that's what ended up how we ended up moving to Georgia.
I see.
And then what happened is then my mom found my stepdad at an early age, and he was a truck driver. So a lot of my early years I spent like on the road traveling with him as a trucker before, I was in school.
That must have been pretty cool.
It was pretty fun. I really enjoyed it. We used to drive around, all the different states, and even in school age, so summers and things of that nature. I would spend with him. So I got two unique stories with being with a truck driver. That's probably one good, one maybe medical related, I guess.
Well, let's hear about it.
So one is there was a time, I forget which state we were in. I really want to say probably like Ohio or something. We spent a lot of time going there. But we were at a truck stop. And so we parked at a truck stop, and of course we were going in. And so you know how in most places, roads is underdeveloped, so they had a lot of loose gravel. So I was running trying to get into the store or catch up to my stepdad, my dad. And I ended up falling and slipped, and I spent around, and I ended up hitting my forehead on the curb.
Oh my goodness.
And so it left like this huge knot on my forehead. And my stepdad he was calling me Professor Clump. But then I remember feeling I was so like, oh my goodness, my head, and so like sleepy. But then, of course, they was, without actually going to the doctor, that was like, hey, don't go to sleep. Don't go to sleep. So, over time, of course, it was all right. The swelling went down. And so, there's that. I spent some time sleeping.
I bet you did. Yeah.
And then another one would be like at an early age. So we're probably talking somewhere teenage area, between 12 and 13. I was with him. We were coming in. I feel like we were in Tennessee. And I don't know if I should be sharing this. It might be a little illegal, but he taught me how to drive. So he taught me how to drive the truck, stick shift, standard shift, truck. And
that is so cool.
I drove us most of the way home, right? So, the most truckers listening to their radio, their CB in the radio, right? So, funny story is when he taught me, of course, I'm learning how to shift and drive the truck. And so I'm getting on the ramp to enter onto the highway, and we get stuck on the ramp. And so I couldn't put it in gear, and I got stuck. So all the truckers was on the radio and was just talking mess. Oh, this must be a new driver. These student drivers, blah, blah, blah. It was just going on for
I'll
hours.
say it was a new driver.
So he got me unstuck off the ramp, and once we got on the highway, then I was good to go. It was just smooth sailing.
That's a great story.
Brought it on home all into Georgia.
I think a lot of us that grew up in the South learned how to drive either in the laps of our dads or uncles or whatever.
Yep.
Maybe not in an 18-wheeler, but, pickup trucks and things of that sort. And it sounds like that's where you got your driving education as well. Probably you didn't realize it at the time, but I'm guessing seeing different areas of the country like that must have been educational for you. Again, you probably didn't realize it at the time, but would you agree that it was good for you to have seen some places other than the Atlanta suburbs at that age?
Yeah, I think so. It was. I would agree. So I seen a lot, and as I got older, I remember him working for a company called Premier, and so I don't know. Most people. Well, I guess most people might know the story, but he used to deliver to Kmart a lot, and so with this particular center, we used to have to unload the truck like physically. So we would pull up in the Kmart dock, and then load down the boxes. And of course, we were going to a number of stores. So not only did I see a lot from my experiences and our drives everywhere, and, we had good talks, but I feel like I was able to start that early, life of just work ethic and what it means for hard work and, earning a living, right? Watching him see how he made a living for us while they were together. And then, me being able to participate in that. So it was a good experience.
Sounds like he was a pretty good example for you.
Yeah, he was a good role model. Still is to this day, even though they're divorced. So, he was and is, that at one point I knew I was like, hey, I might be a truck driver. So I would have all the toys with the truck and trailers and all that stuff. So, he was definitely that. It was pretty good.
Today's episode is brought to you by Eagle Financial Group. Eagle Financial Group is here to help you understand your numbers and to make wise decisions. Whether it's fractional CFO services, accounting, bookkeeping, payroll, or tax strategies and preparation, Eagle Financial Group is your partner to ensure that your practice keeps on serving your patients and gives you more time to spend with your family and friends. It's time that you overcome your obstacles and get control of your financial life today. Give Eagle Financial Group a call at 719-755-0043. Drop us an email at clientservices@eaglefsg.com or visit us online at eaglefsg.com. We are a proud sponsor of the MD Coaches family of podcasts.
Hi, I'm Rhonda Crow, founder and CEO for MD Coaches. Here on RX for Success, we interview a lot of great medical professionals on how they grew their careers, how they overcame challenges, and how they handle day-to-day work. I really hope you're getting a lot of great information. But if you're looking for an answer to a specific problem, management or administration challenge, or if you're feeling just a bit burnt out, like maybe you chose the wrong career, well, then there's a faster way to get the help you need. No, it's not counseling, it's coaching. RX for Success is produced by MD Coaches, a team of physicians who have been where you are. I know you're used to going it alone, but you don't have to. Get the support you need today. Visit us at mymdcoaches.com to schedule your complimentary consultation. Again, that's mymdcoaches.com, because you're not in this alone.
Well, let's talk about another part of your life that I'm sure was substantially formative for you. I know that you got your undergraduate education at Regis University. Do you want to tell us how that came about? Denver is a long way from Atlanta.
For sure.
Particularly for a young man who's spending most of his time driving an 18-wheeler. So how'd you find your way out there?
So we graduated Stockbridge High School. And so, of course, the conversation of college comes up, right? Way before graduation, of course. So it was my dream. In third grade, I did a Black History report on a man named Thurgood Marshall. So from the time I did that, right, we know him, right? So from the time that I did the report on Thurgood Marshall, it was always my dream to become a lawyer. And in fact, when I got to high school, I increased that dream by I wanted to become a police officer, mostly federal, then become a lawyer to ultimately become a judge, right? And just so I can have both sides of the law and then be able to properly judge on it as I'm being a judge, right?
And Tariq, I'm going to ask you, it just occurred to me that there are probably some young listeners to this podcast who might not have ever heard of Thurgood Marshall, but just tell us who he was.
For sure. So Thurgood Marshall was the first Black Supreme Court justice in America. I forget the exact year, but he started his career off as a lawyer and working for the NAACP, which is the Association for African Americans who, went around and helped with legal judgments during the civil rights for Blacks and underserved groups to be able to have the rights to vote and things of that nature. So there's a really good movie out about him. And if you haven't heard of Thurgood Marshall, I would encourage you to look at it. But he served all the way up until right before they replaced him with Clarence Thomas, who's sitting now. But so really good individual. And so, that's who my role model was for my career path.
Okay.
So when I went to high school, they had a program called Public Safety where we got to do like trial and law stuff and public safety clubs where we were, like security, if you will, for festivities and things in the school. And so a lady by the name of Miss Tony Barnes was the instructor for all 4 years. And so she had a heavy influence on my life. We were real close. She was like another mom to me. At this stage, like my mom was a single parent of 3 and she worked a lot. So my mom worked to provide for us while, I helped take care of my brother and sister and went to school. And so what ended up happening was my path was for me to go. I wanted to go to Howard to the HBCU, which is a historically Black college university, and then to end up becoming a lawyer. But then I realized that, I never really had the conversation about college and like what that means as far as like how to get there, as far as student loans with any counselors or not even with my parents, my mom. My mom's not a college graduate. She did do some college courses, and my dad wasn't a college graduate either. So these conversations wasn't probably normal for most, inner city or kids growing up poor, period.
Sure.
So I ended up meeting this recruiter. This is like 11th grade, senior year, was started in 11th grade and then going to junior year, all the way going into senior year. I met this recruiter of the Army. And so I came home and told my mom, I said, hey, I'm going to go to the Army and get my start there. And my original plan was for me to go to the Army Reserve so that I could go to this military college that's in Milledgeville, Georgia. Because to my understanding, after attending 2 years at the military college, then I could go to any other college of my choice. And then, of course, for my last 2 years, and my choice was Howard. Mm-hmm. But we grew up poor in a sense, not having a whole lot, right? Making it from day by day, check by check. So a lot of the stuff that I grew up doing to make money, I would cut grass. So I started entrepreneurship early without really realizing what entrepreneurship was. But I would cut grass on the regular, which is how I made money. And so there were 2 individuals who knew my personal story in detail, the things that we were dealing with, the struggles and things of that nature. That was Ms. Barnes. And then I had a school resource officer named Officer Miller. So one day I was having a conversation with the school resource officer, Officer Miller, and I was telling him hey, I'm going to do the Army. So he was telling me about his Army experiences. Being stationed in Egypt and the things that he experienced and did. And based off him knowing my story, he told me not to go reserve, that I should think about going active duty. Because he was like, if I go reserve, I'll basically be at home and the same stuff that I'm dealing with or we going through, it's no hard escape from it because I'll still be technically at home.
Right.
And I was like, oh, wow, I didn't really think about that, right? Because my whole mind was I just needed a way to go to college. So what I ended up doing is I called my recruiter, I called Sergeant Moran. I was like, hey, I want to go active duty. And that actually is what happened. So we found for me to go active duty, I enlisted in. And I think we graduated May 20 something, right before Memorial Day. And I was set off to ship in the next month, June 26th or 27th is when I left here to go to Fort Jackson. And so I was in the Army, active duty. First duty station was Korea. So I spent a year in Korea. And my next duty station was Colorado Springs. And that's what landed me in Colorado.
Uh-huh. And about what period of time was this in terms of years?
So this was, I joined in 2010. I graduated 2010 from high school, joined in 2010. And so I was in the military from 2010 to 2014.
I only asked, I was curious if you were in there during those times when there were a lot of things going on in the Middle East, but it sounds like you just barely missed that.
Just barely missed it. So we deployed to Kuwait and to Camp Buren in preparation for if we needed to jump in and head over to Iraq.
Right.
But when we deployed, we spent our time over there in Kuwait. We never went into Iraq. We came home safely. This was in 2013. So it was good experience. So military was fun. I knew that I didn't want to retire, but when you kind of in that world and just kind of used to things, then you kind of go with the flow. So I wanted to reenlist when it came time for a reenlistment period. And interesting story, I actually ended up reenlisting. So when I joined the military, I was a 92 Fox, what they call a petroleum specialist, which is a person who handled fuel for the military. So we were attached to infantry units that went out to tankers and we managed the fuel concept. Mm-hmm. So Korea was, for my first duty station, was very interesting and fun. Most military people, if there are some veterans that listen, they probably understand that overseas is probably where you really get into it and learn your job the most, depending on your job. Because most people go over there without family, so all you got to do is do military and that's it, right? So we did a lot of field work, a lot of training, and then once we came to the States, of course, you get hit with a lot of distractions. So you still military, but there's still like the world to experience and being free in that instance, in that sense. But what happened was in my military career, so I wanted to re-enlist, but like I said, I also knew that I didn't want to retire. One of the things that made me not want to retire, this is my first plug into financial management that I didn't really realize, was I remember one day we had just did PT, so I stayed at the unit to shower, change, and get ready for the day. And while I'm showering, I overhear these two senior enlisted military officers. They were E7s. And one of them asked the other one, they were like, hey, man, let's go get some breakfast. And the other one replied to him and said, he said, man, I can't, I'm not going to be able to go. I got to wait till payday so that I can, afford to get breakfast. And so this was like,
oh my goodness,
this had to be like somewhere around the 10th. And of course, everybody know military structure get paid on the 1st and the 15th. And so I was like, wow, we're just like a couple of days from payday. And this guy's like, I got to wait till get paid. And so the first thing I thought about was like, you mean to tell me that I got to spend years to make it to E7, right? Just to get the E7 and still live like paycheck to paycheck. Like, I really don't want that future. And so that was always in my mind. But like I said, things happen and you just kind of roll with the punches. And I wanted to re-enlist. And so in the military, I really struggle with the run section of our physical fitness test. That's important because it speaks to how I got out. What ended up happening was when we went to Kuwait was when I was able to pass a physical fitness test, meaning the run section of it, because you got to run 2 miles, right? 2-minute push-ups and 2-minute sit-ups. And they have a bracket that tells you how fast you got to do it, how many reps you got to do based off your age. So me, I was like 18, 19 or 19, 20 at this point. So we're at the youngest and the highest reps that you got to do. I knew I had to run a 2 mile in a 14 minutes standpoint, right? Or time frame. I used to have to work hard to do it. I ended up doing it to re-enlist. And what ended up happening was when we came back from deployment, the orders came down from schooling to send me to a leadership school for me to prepare to get the next rank. And so it was like mandatory that we had to go. So I didn't want to go because I felt like I wasn't really ready to go. But it was like mandatory and they made us go. We took a physical fitness test that was part of the requirements, and I ended up failing it. At the same time, we had a transition of power. So we had a new commander who came in, right? And so, of course, that came with new rules. And so basically, as a result of failing the test and filling out the school, they were like, hey, we're giving you a few months period to, we're going to have a PT test at this date. If you pass, you can stay in. If you fail, we're going to chapter you out of the military. So at that time, I remember being so distraught, like, oh my God, I don't know what I'm going to do. And so the only thing I did was I really just prayed, right? Because everything I've always done, I've always felt spiritually led that God always had a way for me to do it. The military, right? Like I never thought of these things. Like all this stuff just came in my way. And I was pretty much like on a mission or told to go this direction. And I've always been like that, even as a child. So I prayed on it. And I said, God, if this is for me, let me know. If it's time for me to go, let me know. And so when I took the test to determine my future, I remember running, and I ran hard. Normally, if you're running hard, right, at the end of 2 miles, you're going to be exhausted. You gasping for air, all these things. And I remember feeling at the end of the test so at peace. Didn't pass it, but I felt like a burden was lifted when I crossed that finish line of running the 2 miles. And that was that point where I understood what God was telling me, that it was time for me to go. I spent my time here enough. I ended up getting chaptered out. This was 2014, and it was really rough because it was a mindset shift to accept God's responsibility and mission and understand what we were dealing with. We had one child at the time. I got married young before I was married at 19. And so we had one child. I had my first daughter in 2013, and I got out. We had her August of 2013, and I was chaptered out March of 2014. And so it was really tough for me to find my way. Just, so we were struggling. We were out in Colorado Springs, no family. It was just us. And I had a mentor in the military. I did a lot of cool stuff. So one of the things I did was ship our company all the way to Kuwait. They call it a unit movement officer. Normally people who are doing this are lieutenants. But I was the youngest in age and the youngest in rank to be a part of this class of doing UMO and hazmat and have the responsibility of shipping our company from Colorado all the way to Kuwait. So there I met this guy who was a retired military person, worked on the base as a government employee. And he told me when I was getting out, he was like, Tariq, he said, always know what you're worth and never settle. He said, never settle. So I kept that in my head. So when I got out of the military, I had the first call for a job to do a supply government job. And I remember they were going to offer me $12 an hour, and that was it. And so I turned the job down immediately. And so my wife looked at me like I was crazy. Like, boy, what? Like, you don't have nothing coming in. And you just turn it down $12 an hour. So now, fast forward, she's like, that's the day I knew, like, she's like, I didn't know what you was going to do, but I knew you was going to be successful. That's why you turning down $12 an hour job. But I always remember, my mentor, he was just like, listen, don't settle, right? Go for what you're worth. And I ended up landing a job working at the chemical plant, and it started at $14 an hour, but it had its steps. So by the time it was said and done, like within a matter of 6 months, I was making $18 an hour as a government employee at this chemical plant.
That's an improvement. But a really interesting story, and I really appreciate having those details. It's really fascinating to me the way serendipity sort of builds the platform that eventually supports you where you want to go. But going on with your education, once you got into classes at Regis, did you know what you wanted to do at that point, or were you still uncertain?
So I was still uncertain. What I took up was business administration. So I knew at a young age. So just a little, I guess, history backstory here. So on my father's side of the family, I, at a young age, always considered them to be like most successful. My grandpa was a businessman in New York. He owned restaurants, owned his own real estate property management. My dad was, after he, was released from prison, he did a number of entrepreneurial journeys from starting different companies. And so I was like, man, these guys are really successful. And I remember at a young age.
So you had some role models in the family.
Right. I had some role models still, right? So it wasn't all bad. So I had some role models, and my thing was, I was like, I knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur, but I didn't know what. So in Regis, I took up business administration while I was still working, while having a wife and kids. By the time I settled on what I wanted to do, we were, I want to say, 4 kids in. So I had my daughter, and I had my son, and then right before I signed the contract to work for Northwestern Mutual, my twins were born. So how I found Northwestern Mutual was at one of the classes I took at Regis was like a social networking, a social media class. So we learned about like WordPress and all these social platforms. And we had one of the assignments of the classes or event, we had a networking event. And so the teacher brought in like people from different professionals. And it was my first time like attending a networking situation or event. And I met a recruiter there from Northwestern Mutual, which piqued my interest into the company and what they did. So I tried to follow up with them, no luck. And this was in Denver, because I used to have to travel to Denver. It was only like an hour away. And so I didn't have any luck for it had to be like 3 to 4 months. And then I just kind of gave up on it. But then one day, the very next year, this was 2017, I just was like, man, I remember the company Northwestern Mutual. So I looked it up to see if there was one in Colorado Springs, and there was. And so I reached out to the company, and what I ended up doing was I got accepted to do their internship program as a full-time student, because I just wasn't a traditional student, but to do their internship program. And I did their internship program in 2017 and fell in love with the company. And what actually did it was Northwestern Mutual, if anybody know about the company, but they have a annual event every year where they go to the home office of Northwestern Mutual, which is up in Milwaukee. So all the advisors from all across the U.S. meet up in Milwaukee once a year over a few days for just a conference, awards, and continued education in the space. And when I went there, I was just blown away about the amount of knowledge that they were teaching about finances and wealth. And I never had been exposed to conversations like that growing up in my community.
So you were you were kind of hanging around with the big brains in one of the biggest financial companies in the world.
Yes.
It's pretty cool.
And in my opinion, to this day, still one of the best, right? So it's like, I was like really, really exposed. So I was drinking the corporate Kool-Aid, if you will. And I went home and I was telling my wife about it. And I was like, I really think this is what I want to do. I, mind you, never been in sales, never been, in corporate America in this status besides the military. And so I ended up being able to get accepted to get a contract to be a full-time advisor. And so I learned a lot, but it was very challenging for me, right? It was very, very challenging for me. Learned a lot about how the wealthy deal with their money, working with joint cases with other senior advisors, the education that we used to get, learning about how insurance work, how investments work, and just the budgeting and just how wealthy people made money, how they dealt with their money, and what they thought about money and their family. And so in my head, I was like, man, I could really change the narrative in our community by all this information that I've never been exposed to. I know most people in our community and the African-American community is not learning this, And so that was my mission, to join the company, sell life insurance, educate the African American community on how they can uplift themselves, be educated around finances. And what I had was a lot of passion and desire, and it was met with reality of hard work. So what I mean by that is, in Colorado Springs, the state is probably made up of maybe like 4 to 5% African Americans in the state.
Right.
So in Colorado Springs, I am one of only 2 Black advisors in the office. Right. I think at one point we had another one, but then they left. And so basically one of only 2 Black advisors in the office. That came with its challenges, because what I ended up realizing was I'm trying to sell life insurance to African Americans, and I'm going after clients who are still trying to understand like how to pay their bills on a day to day, let alone understand the concepts of life insurance and financial planning, to be planning for the future when they're trying to live day to day, Mm-hmm. And so that was met with challenges of how to survive, make money, for me to make a living, and do what I'm supposed to be contracted to do.
Well, now, Tariq, I have to, I apologize for the interruption, but I really want to ask the question that I think really needs to be asked. And that is, was the reason that you were having so much difficulty attracting clients simply because of the profound racial disparity and you couldn't find people that really wanted to work with an African-American advisor? Or was it just something else?
I think it was, I don't want to put it that far. I think that's true. And I think also, as I reflect back on it, I think that the environment that I was in the office that I was in, I think it was really hard for a lot of the advisors to teach me how to sell to non-African Americans so that we could make a living. And in my head, I'm thinking that I could just make a living selling only to majority African Americans. And I figured out that that wasn't the case.
I see.
So I didn't know how to transition to not selling to African Americans and selling to our, Caucasian or white counterparts that could, add that value. And it was, and the racial disparities is a thing, right? So of course, all the big firms were on the initiative of diversity and inclusion. So there was a big thing to grow the diversity and inclusion amongst the office. But I remember I had an advisor, and he was pretty, so he was an advisor. People were like, I don't know if you ever had somebody there like, hey, warn you about like, don't mess with this person. He's really like he's like a hard person, or, he's not that, tough to crack. And his name was Scott McKinnick. But we had a serious conversation. It was the first time I really got to understand him. And I was like, oh, Scott's not that bad. He's a cool person. But what he told me was, he said, listen, I'm going to just be honest with you. He said, people, African-American and women, I haven't seen them in my career last in this career field. Like, this is a career field that's for white males. And that's who survives here. There's not a lot of women who succeed over here. Yeah. There's not a lot of African-Americans who succeed over here. He told me straight up. And I really appreciated that honesty, because it brought me to just, a level of understanding of the playing field that I was in. But not for one second, I took up everything that I could, and learned a whole lot. And so what ended up happening was, so the next year that I went to annual, I met this brother, this African-American guy by the name of Timothy Radden. He works for Northwestern Mutual, has a practice out in Phoenix, Arizona. And Tim Radden was the first African-American hire, to my knowledge, at Northwestern Mutual. And then was one of the first African-Americans to like hit top rated charts at African Forum Advisor, $1 Million Roundtable, like all the accolades. The person that you want to be, it was him. And he became a mentor. from his story, I understood, like now looking back at it, because what ended up happening was, just to, I guess, go back and forth, was I ended up getting fired from Northwestern Mutual because I wasn't really cutting it as an advisor. I wasn't hitting the minimums. That's
Right.
basically what it was. So of course, initially I'm all mad and just like, man, and they really didn't know what I want to do, because that's where I didn't see anything else. I was like, man, I just knew that I would be a career advisor. Maybe I was just a late bloomer. Year 4, year 5, I would take off and my career just stellar to the top, but that didn't happen. But before I left, I had the opportunity to work with Timothy Radden, and Tim's business was majority of his clients were physicians. And so he taught a course specifically, they put a program together specifically for African-American advisors, and he taught it. And he taught us over a 4-course series where we traveled from different cities to learn over a 4-course series, like how to get into the physician market, how to work with physicians, right, and why physicians need our help as advisors. And he broke into like his practice and what he discovered. And where his office is in Phoenix, he did like a marketing analysis and discovered there was like some crazy number, like 4 to 5 hospitals within the 2-mile radius, north, south, east, and west of his office. So this is like back in the day before Zoom and all that stuff. Yeah. So of course, advisors is trying to figure out how to maximize their time, add value to their clients, and receive income. So because he realized that these hospitals were within this short radius, that's who he decided to target as an audience, because that's who was there, right? So he would go to these different hospitals, and that's how he built his book of business, built Forum Advisors. So he was teaching us all the stuff. So there was this one story he told me, or told us, because it was a group of us, that made me realize, like now, as I have exited out of Northwestern Mutual, the disconnect between my thinking of me being a career field advisor and the office's disconnect on how to help somebody like me, sell and be successful in Northwestern.
Right.
And so he said, he had a managing partner, really just like seen some potential in him and felt that he would be really, really successful, and the managing partner took him under his wing and taught him directly, told him everything he had to do to really be successful. And Tim took it, did it, ran with it, and became successful. So in that instance, Tim was planted in the right place at the right time in the right environment. Me looking back at it, I understand that I was there for a short amount of time to learn what I need to learn to continue God's mission. But at that time, I didn't see it that way. I looked at it like, they didn't really help me. The office wasn't reaching out to me for me to be successful. I didn't have any senior leadership support, which I didn't. But then I think to be successful, there's a 90% percentile that we have to take accountability for our own actions. Mm-hmm. And so I'm like, hey, I could have learned more. I could have tried more. I could have been willing to do other things, to figure out the way to penetrate other markets, to work with other people, to be successful in this business.
Well, I'm sure there's probably several chapters in the book that take us from that point right there to Eagle Financial Group. But maybe you can give us sort of the Reader's Digest version and talk about where you are now.
So between there and then, or then and now, what happened was my dad put together these family businesses, and he started about 5 of them, and he put it together with a group of us, siblings and my uncle being involved. And we started a company one of the companies was Business Services Solutions, where he wanted us to do taxes and be an all service-based business for business owners and individuals on the finance side. And of course, me having the experience, me leading that charge. The problem was, though, Randy, was I didn't want to do taxes. I said, no, I don't.
I can't imagine why.
Right.
What could possibly be more exciting than taxes, right?
Right. Like I didn't want to do taxes. Like on top of just the tax work and of course being at Northwestern Mutual, so we learned a lot about the tax code. So I knew most of the tax code in and out from advisory, but I didn't want to deal with I didn't want to deal with the clientele that came with the individual taxes that I knew we were going to be doing. So I was like, I don't want to do this. And I was real hesitant on joining the companies. But like I said, I was always, with that spiritually led, and I prayed on it. And so I told my dad, I said, listen, I'm going to go all in. Boom. So I said, I'm going to do it. So I learned how to do individual taxes and ended up discovering that I really enjoyed it and was really good at it based off my knowledge that I already had. And then, but quickly did I realize that I wanted to work with business owners. So that was my introduction into tax. What ended up happening was, I left the company based off just some personal stuff that goes on with, all the bad things you hear about partnerships. And on top of that, family partnerships, like still was just behind, wasn't getting paid, all these things of that nature. And it put me on a crossroad to figure out what is it that I wanted to, or what I was going to do. And so that's what birthed Eagle Financial Group. And what happened was in 2021, so the way I got into taxes was through my dad, but we got into it because my uncle was in the tax industry and was successful at it on the individual side. He'd been in the industry for like a little over 10 years at the time that we started. But in 2021, they started to educate people on getting into the business owners on how they can make money from being into doing taxes. And so I went to their boot camp, and it was the boot camp that gave me the courage to say, hey, let me start my own company and see if I could do this on my own. And so that's how Eagle Financial Group was birthed.
But it's a pretty brave move to step out there and do something like that. You're creating something, and yet you're still a bit of a student, wouldn't you say?
Yeah. So creating something, being a bit of a student. But I think that's what entrepreneurship is. It's just the courage to just get out there before somebody else, but also understanding that there's a learning curve, right? So even though I know that I'm good at what I do, there's still a whole lot that I still learn and still, seek mentors and coaches to learn more. I knew my vision was to create a financial firm that wasn't just one-sided in the sense that could work with business owners and truly be a holistic firm where we took taxes and tax strategies and planning and incorporated with the business planning, which also included, financial planning as far as the insurance and the retirement accounts and things of that nature. And so how can I fully service business owners to where they really don't have to go anywhere, and or individuals that I can walk them into a platform where they'll be set and don't have to go anywhere outside of legal advice and loans. Cause I'm like, we're not going to do any lending. And so that's how I came up with the services. So at our firm, we do tax preparation, tax strategies. We do CFO services. And within that, there's bookkeeping, payroll, and accounting services that we do. And we still offer life insurance.
Well, let's talk about that process a little bit. How did you go about getting the message out about what you had to offer? And I guess basically is, I'm saying, how did you decide how to go about attracting clients and finding clients?
In my stint with the family companies, we were, despite having issues and financial issues, we were really successful to have been in the tax side. So 3 of us kind of took that charge to get tax clients. And so basically how I started off was friends and family, and then it led to referrals. So some old clients, but mostly friends and family, and advertising on social media and text messages. I was sending individual texts to like everybody I knew. Hey, we do taxes. I do taxes. And that led to us within the years of the family company. We hit 6 figures our first year. So when I left and started my own company, I took my clients with me, of course, because they was my clients. So I set up my whole company, my own software, everything, and advertised to my clients. And so we started off again in those arenas of the of my individual clients that I had. But I had a few business owner clients who I was working with over the course of those 2 years, just from adding value just from the annual tax basis side. And so I remember even when I started the company, we were really scared. I didn't have no money really, and none at all. But what happened was I got a client who called me, and she was in the healthcare space. So she does like private home healthcare. And she was like, Tariq, I know it's time for me to just start, getting really detailed with my business, do my bookkeeping, and so we could take our business to the next level. I had already been working with her for 2 years on an annual basis, telling her what she needed to do. I said, okay, so great. So to do bookkeeping, this would be my first bookkeeping client that on my own that I would have gotten. So I said, okay, great. Well, to do it, right, it's going to be about $500 a month for you to do the bookkeeping services. And we could do this on a monthly basis. Here's the days of the payments. And here's how we set it up, doing all that stuff manually. Well, she was like, well, Tariq, well, do you have other payment options? And I was like, well, what are you looking to do? She was like, well, what if I just pay you for the year all up front? And I was like, well, sure, you could do that. So I was like a little over $6,000. And I still didn't believe it. I was like, no, there's no way she's going to pay this. Like who's going to pay this annual fee up front? Like, I never heard of that. And so she was like, hey, well, what's the information to wire into the account? I still gave it to her. And still in my head, I'm just like, no, this is not going to happen. Of course, I just started. I'm just getting started, right? So I'm just like, man, this is not going to happen. And then the next day, sure enough, the little over $6,000 was in my account. And I just remember just feeling accomplished. And I cried, Randy. I cried. I looked at my wife and I was like,
understand.
Oh my God, she paid us the $6,000. Oh my goodness, blah, blah, blah. That led us into doing the bookkeeping services. And so each service just kind of added itself. And from doing the bookkeeping service, I realized that, well, hey, we need to get a little bit more detail in the financial analysis, which led me to get into the CFO services. And then, we were already doing tax planning, but then to make it more official to actually do this tax planning, then we started doing it. And all this happened over the span of a couple of years. Company quickly made 6 figures. And well on our trajectory into the projections of the multi-7 figures.
Yeah, that's very interesting. And I was just about to say, what you're describing sounds like a really interesting hybrid between CPA and financial advisor. Do you see yourself that way at all?
That's how I see myself. So I label myself as a financial and tax strategist. And because of my extensive knowledge and how I grow my firm and our employees that we bring on, that's how I see myself, more of that strategist, because we are able to bridge the gap between the planning and the tax world and make it together to be holistic to add that value to business owners.
Yeah.
Because on the truth of it, of the nature, on the financial planning services, any financial planning or advisors may agree or disagree. But at the end of the day, right, we may do planning, especially anybody who works for a firm like Northwestern Mutual or New York Life or something like that. You're going to do planning, but at the end of the day, the way that you get paid is by actually putting clients into products that they purchase. So we got to sell life insurance or we got to sell retirement accounts, right? And so most of them, depending on the company and depending on if they're independent, now they start to realize, well, hey, I can get paid on the advisory based off the value that I add to these clients. And then we can get paid as well off the products and services we put into them. And so I realized that we could do that for business owners because that's what business owners have the most needs, right? High net worth individuals have the most needs. And we have the solutions to solve all the needs that these business owners and high income individuals have.
So are you continuing to focus on primarily African-American clients, or do you make yourself widely available to anybody who's interested? I'm very interested to know how that's developed, because if I were still in practice, I'd want to be your client.
For sure. So how that developed is I open up my firm to everybody, right? So I don't target one specific race or gender. We go after any and everybody. I have a number of well-diverse clients from Spanish to African-American to Caucasian. And how that ended up happening was Tim. This was still when I was with Northwestern. Mm-hmm. Tim told me, he said, listen, Tariq, He said, I understand that you want to service African Americans. I said, he said, most of us who get into this career field, that's what we want to service. He said, the problem with that is you have to target a specific group of African American called the affluent African Americans, those of us who have reached a certain level of financial intellect or profession that give us the money to be able to afford the products and services that we offer. He said, so what you should do is just service the clients, no matter what the color is. And the way that you give back to your community is you do it by charity, right? Provide educational services, teach them till they get to the point where they could afford your services. He said, but for right now, you have to go after the people who can help you be successful and who you can properly serve. And so I really didn't understand what that meant then. But then as I opened up my firm and then we started to do taxes, what I quickly realized was that money is not necessarily a race barrier. It's just a barrier. It's either you came into money and you know how to use it or you don't. So I find many people, right, from nurse practitioners to physicians that are all descent, color, backgrounds, and they just don't understand the thing about money to know how to manage it, what to do with it, how to service them with it. And so that opened my eyes to being not targeted by race, but just open to having a conversation with any and everybody.
Well, it's a really remarkable business model, and I'm fascinated by what you've done. I have often wondered why, if you were in a position to need financial advice many times, and I think a lot of people still do this, you have to go to different places. You have to go to your accountant, you have to go to your broker, you need to go to your financial advisor, this and that. And it sounds like that you've done a remarkable job of condensing a very important service into one place, one-stop shopping for a very complicated need that exists among lots of people. And it really has worked out very well for you. So congratulations on that.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Well, look, I really enjoyed hearing about the story of how Eagle Financial Group came about, and congratulations to you on that. I really enjoyed the conversation. Having said that, I want to do what we came here to do, and that is give you an opportunity just to speak to our audience on your own. So I'm going to step out of the way for a few minutes, and audience, Tariq Collins is going to give us his personal prescriptions for success.
My personal prescriptions for success will be, first thing, just from my story, as you heard, right? I'm very spiritually led. So I think that anything that you do, you really should be having a calling for it, right? There's a time where you may not know what the calling is. So, you just do a lot of stuff. So I think in your early years, you want to just work to figure out what it is that you really want to do or called to do. But just being here to the call and making sure that you have good coaches along the way. So then specific when it comes to money habits, you want to make sure that we're doing the proper things around our money, right? Budgeting, saving. Do we have good cash flow either in our business or in our personal life, right? Are we doing a lot of paying bills to get all these material things and having to work to pay it off, right? So you want to create good habits. You want to create good habits of work ethic, and you want to create good money habits. Those habits come with actually assigning things for your dollars to do, right? So as you know, money comes in, you start to control and place where it goes. So this works for your personal financial side, the business side, and more especially for taxes, right? Because the more that you, especially our business owners, the more that you have control over it, the better you are at telling where your money to go to keep more of it and pay less to Uncle Sam, because nobody wants to just give away money to Uncle Sam, right? And you always just want to be a student. So just learn as you go, right? So even in our most professional career fields, we have, we know that we know a lot of stuff, and we know that we are the top at what we do. And so it's best to still always remain a student and learn from anybody, learn from the old, learn from the young, seek out your coaches and mentors to learn. And so one of the things I want to dispel about on my prescription list is just that real belief around money. Money has the value that you really place on it. And when it comes down to it, it's just a matter of how people think about money. And that's the difference between the brackets of the poor and the wealthy. Poor people think about money to pay bills. I make money and the money's already spent before they got it. I got to pay rent. I got to pay this. I got to pay that. The middle class to rich think about money to work for it, right? To make a lot of money, to buy things that they really can't afford, to work overtime to pay it off. And then the wealthy understand that we need to make money for our money to make money. And that's really the key difference, right? So it's really simple once you just get a different viewpoint on how to see money. So once you get out of that keeping up with the Joneses, going out there and buying this and buying that and got to get the big house and got to get the car and all these materialistic things that depreciate over time and nothing that's really appreciating or adding value to your life or your money, you start to see money the way wealthy people do. And wealthy people make money for their money to make money of how they can make money in their sleep, how I can control most of it and not give it away to the government, right? And how I can be in control of and be a good steward of where my money goes, right? And so to wrap that up, one of the formulas that I've learned about it, and this applies to anything as we get around mindset, there's a formula to success that we have, right? And I think in order for us, before we get to that formula, there's a practicality formula that we must understand about how to obtain knowledge and apply it. So ignorance, right? You go through these different stages in life. First you have ignorance. Ignorance is the absence of truth, right? So as a baby, you're just born and you don't know nothing. So your parents is trying to teach you what's this, what's that. Oh, I have a hand, I have an ear, I have a nose. This is my name. And once you become knowledgeable on that, then you have what's called knowledge, right? So knowledge is the accumulation of truth. So once you go from ignorance, you go to knowledge because you accumulated truth. Then from accumulating truth and having knowledge, you have understanding, which is the assimilation of truth, right? So having a real understanding, right? And so understanding that you can have knowledge without having understanding. Like I may know taxes and know about taxes and know I have to pay taxes every year, but I don't really understand that as an employee that I get paid, the government takes their money and then I get what's left. And then as a business owner, well, I get paid, I get to choose what my expenses are, and then the government gets what I say is left based off my profit. That's having understanding. And then wisdom is where you ultimately want to get to. And wisdom is just the application of truth. So after I acquired it and understand it, now I have wisdom because I applied it in my life. So now that I understand budgeting, I know that once I make money, 20% goes over here for taxes, 30% is over here for my living expenses, and my living expenses is not more than what it needs to be. And then you have created good money habits, and then you know where to put your money to save for retirement. Always begin with the end in mind. And so with that brings us to a success formula that I practice on a daily basis. Having the right mindset times the skill set with the right tool set equals assets, and assets follow income, right? Or income follow assets, right? So if I have the right mindset around money or whatever it is that I'm trying to do, and I multiply that with the skill set to be good at a particular skill, and then I know I can add value to the marketplace, right? And then I put that with the right tool set, then I know that I will produce an asset and income follow assets. So ultimately, you want to be able to provide value in the marketplace, which as physicians, you all know that you're going to do that, right? How can I get the mindset around being a physician, knowing I have to go through years of school, right? And then years of training, right? Before you can even get to the amount of wealth that you know that you can get to. And then all that training is producing that skill set. And then you have the application of doing it. And then the right tool set, being in the right environment, right? The hospital, the right mentors, the right leaders. You're going to be producing assets, and income follows that. And so those are my prescription for success. I hope that was helpful and added value to you all.
I think it's going to be a lot of help to whoever is fortunate enough to hear this podcast. A lot of wisdom in there. Tariq, and I appreciate you sharing with us. The notes that I've made include search for your calling, find competent advisors and coaches, develop good habits, never stop learning, and perhaps most importantly, know and understand your relationship with money. There's just a tremendous amount of wisdom in those few little minutes that you shared with us, and I'm so grateful that you were able to take the time to be with us and share with us in that way. Before we go, I want to give you an opportunity to tell our audience where you can be found and how they can get in contact with you if they like.
Yes, Randy. So if anybody's looking to work with us at Eagle Financial Group, we service clients in all 50 states. And so you can reach us via our website at www.eaglefsg.com, www.eaglefsg.com. You can also give us a call at area code 719-755-0043. You can also text that number. That's our office line, and we receive texts. And you can reach us via email at customer support at eaglefsg.com. So if you're looking to reach us, then that's how you do it.
Tariq Collins, it has really been a lot of fun talking with you today, and I thank you so much for taking the time to be with us on Prescriptions for Success.
Thank you. I appreciate your time and appreciate your platform, and hopefully we've added some value that will be able to reach everybody.
Thank you so much for listening today. If you enjoyed the show, you can help us reach more listeners by leaving a rating and a review, especially on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. And if your app doesn't have that option, just leave us an email or a voicemail through SpeakPipe at www.rxforsuccesspodcast.com. You can also help by becoming a Patreon member. That link is in the show notes, and we hope you'll also follow our companion podcast, Life-Changing Moments with Dr. Dale Waxman. Special thanks to our producer, Craig Clausen, our promotions manager, Mariana Rodabaugh, and to Ryan Jones, who created and performs our theme music. And remember, be sure to fill your prescription for success with my next episode.
Today's episode was brought to you by Eagle Financial Group. From fractional CIO to tax prep and everything in between, Eagle Financial Group can help. Find them on the web at eaglefsg.com.